How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. So, why in the hell did everyone seem to love this movie? All over the internet, I have searched for reviews and analysis of the third installment of the Dragon series, and I have come across nothing but positivity and praise. With the occasional review or two that has a little side note here about one or two things that are off. But yet there I was, sitting in the theater watching this movie, and I was groaning over and over again, fighting the urge to just outright yell at the screen at almost every turn. To me, this movie was a betrayal of everything the series had built up over the past two installments, both of which are in my legit top 10 favorite movies of all time. Genuine classics that I doubt I will ever outgrow no matter how many times I watch them over again. The throwing away of the cheat sheet moment in the first movie, it still makes my hair stand on end. Hiccup falling into the flames of the Red Death still makes my heart stop. The first moment seeing Hiccup and Toothless flying together in the second movie still takes my breath away, and I still get so pumped every time Astrid yells, "Take him down, babe!" And I still get chills through my entire body when Toothless explodes out of the ice and challenges the Alpha for Hiccup. This is a franchise that its first two installments have hit every single note they tried to hit, beyond perfectly. So why doesn't The Hidden World make me feel these things? So before I get into why I think this movie sucked balls, I want to point out three scenes right up front that I did in fact love about The Hidden World. Because there's no piece of work I've ever found in my life that hasn't had at least some redeeming qualities or something fantastic about it. And they deserve highlighting, always. Hiccup helping Toothless to woo the Light Fury. This scene was the absolute high point of the movie for me, and even the second time through watching it, I still found myself breaking out into laughter. It's odd, because usually I don't enjoy awkward humor. It's steered me clear away from entire genres, actually. Like, I will never watch The Drew Carey Show ever again, because the humor and situations just get way too tense for me. I don't enjoy seeing that. And yet, something about Toothless having no idea what to do, Hiccup also having no idea what to do, and the both of them secretly trying to figure it all out together without the Light Fury catching on, is adorable in the dorkiest of ways. It's just innocent and charming, and I love it. I don't know why. The save him moment. When Hiccup lets go of the Light Fury after freeing her, and goes plummeting to his death, sacrificing himself for Toothless. Yes! This is the moment that I've been waiting the entire series for. Because God knows how many times Toothless has saved Hiccup. It's finally time for Hiccup to save Toothless instead. Or at least prove that he's willing to die in order to save Toothless. But there are still some flaws with the setup of this moment. I'm not going to nitpick them too much here, because this is the positive part, and this moment was set up so well. The decision to put it entirely in slow motion, mostly in silence, the editing, the score, it all came together and it gave me the biggest emotional charge of the entire movie. Well, save for one other moment.
I knew you'd come around.
The family reunion post-credits scene. Yeah, I know this scene actually came before the credits, but I'm calling it like I see it. This is a post-credits scene. Because it feels so detached from the rest of the movie, it had to have been an add-on created after the first test screenings showed that the audience hated the movie without it. And I wouldn't blame them either. I feel like if this scene didn't exist, I would have burned down the theater out of spite for reasons I'll be getting into soon enough. But then again, seeing the moment when Toothless recognizes Hiccup once again, to see them fly with their new families, sharing the sky with each other as only a dragon and a rider can, you can be damn sure I was crying along with the rest of the theater. But okay, that's all the positivity this movie is getting out of me. Now that I've buttered it up and marinated it properly, It's time to stick it in the oven and cook it alive like it deserves. So if you can't tell, my hopes for this movie were pretty damn high, and they were dashed by the end of the very first scene. Now that doesn't happen very often, especially when the first few shots of the movie were so amazing. Oh, the fog with the light shining through it, the dramatic way that Hiccup emerges, and then how Toothless stalks his prey with Hiccup walking through the flames. Oh, it was so cool. And then Hiccup opens his mouth.
See? Just a guy here to rescue these dragons.
Okay, so you go through all this effort to be dramatic and intimidating, only to immediately backpedal and try and calm down and explain it all to your enemy and demystify them. What the hell? What kind of sense does that make? Pick a strategy, Hiccup. Are you trying to intimidate someone, or are you trying to reason with them? Because you can't have it both ways. And furthermore, you say this is an attempt at a stealth mission? Why the hell are you allowing yourself to be spotted in the first place? What the hell are you doing? And then it gets even worse when the rest of the riders show up. Remember how in the end of the second movie, after years of practice they had all gone through, they were all competent badasses when it came to flying and fighting together? Well, cross that all out, folks. They're back to being the bumbling idiots they were at the start of dragon training from the first movie. Worse even.
Why can't I get this cage open?
It slides.
Obviously.
All that character work and growth undone for the sake of comedy. Comedy which doesn't even land because I'm too busy thinking, who the hell are these dumb fucks? And what the hell did they do with Snotlout, the twins, Fishlegs, and... well, okay, Astrid is still competent, thankfully. But that's only because she's never been anything but competent from the very first time we saw her. There was a whole character in the first movie. And then we pan up to Valka and Cloudjumper, just watching. Making a quip about, oh, they'll get it together eventually. Which, okay, fine, it's a decent quip, but, you know, on a mission like this, shouldn't they be, you know, helping? So we manage to get through that scene and are introduced to the mysterious Light Fury. And then we get to Burke. Am I the only one who has a problem with this? Look at this! I mean, just look at it! Does nobody else understand how this is wrong on so many levels? If you're lost over what I'm talking about, by the way, Burke is completely overcrowded with dragons. Why does nobody seem to care? Either in the audience or in the movie? Okay, I get what I think they were trying to get across here, that Hiccup has a gaping hole in his life from Stoic's death, and is trying to fill that void by finding and rescuing every dragon he can from everywhere around Burke. He's got a personality flaw that he needs to solve, therefore, and that by the end of the movie, he'll have grown up enough to fix that hole in himself, and thus be willing to give up on his need for dragons. Thus, Hiccup has an arc. The only problem is, Hiccup is smarter than this! Burke is smarter than this! And way too stubborn to allow this to have happened!
And where do you suppose we put these ones?
We'll make room.
None of them, especially Hiccup, would have allowed things to get so overcrowded on Burke that a single dragon accidentally bumping into something basically destroys a third of the village. They'd have tied him to a boat and sailed him off to sea, chief or not. Even if Hiccup was collecting all these dragons, the rest of the island of Burke is huge. It's got plenty of space outside of the village for all the rescued dragons to settle. And if not, expand to some of the other islands around. We saw your map in the second movie, Hiccup. Don't tell me you couldn't find a place for them. All of this is also ignoring the fact that Hiccup had gotten over Stoic's death at the end of the second movie. There were no giant gaping holes in his life he needed to fill. He was the chief, and he accepted that role. He had won over Astrid not just as a girlfriend, but as a fiancée. He'd found his long-lost freaking mother. Toothless was the alpha of the dragon pack. He was building a monument to honor Stoic, bigger than life itself, and all of Burke was living with and accepting the dragons, and in fact celebrating Hiccup for leading them into their current utopia. What was missing from his life? This Hiccup from the start of the third movie is not the same awesome, battle-hardened, chief of the tribe, leader of the land of peace between dragons and humans that we saw and loved at the end of the second goddamn movie. And this is supposed to have been less than a year into his reign as chief. What the hell happened? And the biggest problem is that this only gets worse as the movie goes on. Not just because Hiccup is dumber than a bag of rocks all throughout the third movie, but because he's not the only character who's not the same.
Okay, that's just sad and weird.
Yeah, you better do something.
So, in short, Toothless has been reduced to nothing more than a goddamn kitty cat in the hidden world, and it pisses me right the hell off. Remember the first moment we see Hiccup and Toothless alone together in the second movie after they landed? How they bantered back and forth like two, people? Two folks who could think clearly and fluently and articulate a conversation about how Toothless is annoyed that Hiccup is being so reckless and getting more annoyed that Hiccup isn't taking him seriously when he brings it up to him? Yeah, the first moment we see Hiccup and Toothless alone in the hidden world, Toothless just wants to play fucking fetch with Hiccup's leg, and tosses it back to him for him to do it again when he's in the middle of his map making, totally ignoring said map making instead of actually being a part of it like he was in the second movie.
So, what should we name it? Itchy Armpit it is.
Throughout the entire movie, this problem persists, where time after time it seems like Toothless is just a passenger in the story, except for the moments when the Light Fury is there and he's trying to court her. At no time does Toothless do anything to help Hiccup, or push Hiccup to make a decision, change, talk to him, nothing. The only thing Toothless is concerned about throughout the entire movie, save for 2 moments, is following his dick and trying to get with the Light Fury. Those moments being once the new solo tail fin is completed and put on, and then when he gets Hiccup and Astrid out of the hidden world. In the former, we see him, for the first time in the movie, show genuine concern for Hiccup, thinking, but what about you, before Hiccup ushers him to fly off and go on his date. The latter, we see him and Hiccup both understanding that this just might be the moment where they have to say goodbye to one another, and neither of them looks like they want to. Which is exactly how Toothless should be acting. He's Hiccup's partner, brother even. And yet the entirety of the movie, it feels like Toothless couldn't care less that Hiccup even exists, except for the fact that Toothless needs Hiccup to make him a new tail fin. This is the thing that undermines the entirety of the previous 2 movies, of which the entire point was that Toothless and Hiccup were both stronger together than they ever were apart. They were so inseparable that it could be said that they needed each other, and not just because Toothless couldn't fly without him. That's what the best moment in the entire franchise was about. In Gift of the Night Fury, after Hiccup gives Toothless a new tail fin that actually does allow him to fly on his own, Toothless only uses it to go do something for Hiccup in finding his lost helmet. Once that's done, he pulls out the old saddle and right in front of Hiccup destroys the new tail fin in order to get the point across to Hiccup that he doesn't want to fly unless Hiccup is with him. It's sweet, it's wholesome, it's perfect, and it always brings me to tears whenever I watch it because it's so good. It's the core of their relationship, and it's fine if you want to challenge that notion and focus the movie around Hiccup and Toothless growing to the point that they don't need each other anymore. But that's an entirely different thing than having Toothless ignore Hiccup and even forget about Hiccup for the sake of getting his dick wet. Which brings me to the hidden world. And while many might take this as a nitpick, I don't, because to me, this is a big one. And it further goes to show how bad the writing is in this movie. So after Toothless flies off on his own and we see him finally winning over the heart of the Light Fury, we go back to Hiccup and Burke, and we stay with them for a day. Just a day. Watching Hiccup become a worrisome parent because Toothless hadn't come back, so he and Astrid go off and end up finding the hidden world. In that time, over the course of, again, one day, apparently Toothless and the Light Fury have not just become inseparable and so infatuated with each other that Toothless has completely forgotten about Hiccup, but apparently he's also become the king of all wild dragons. What? Okay, I mean, what? How? How in the hell does Toothless, even being the alpha of his own pack, gain the trust or respect or whatever of every wild dragon he has never ever met before and become their king? This makes no sense at all, especially considering the second movie. It took Toothless challenging a bewildebeest and defeating it to earn the respect of just the pack of Burke and become their alpha. And he was only strong enough to do that, by the way, because he'd become so enraged by its attempt to kill Hiccup that he effectively went Super Saiyan. It was earned when he became alpha in the second movie. In this one, we're just supposed to accept that Toothless did something off screen, or even worse, expect that because he's the last Night Fury, he has the birthright to be the king of all wild dragons. Oh gee, what a fantastic message. It's not who you are, it's what you are. Nazism at its finest. Jesus goddamn Christ. And this is all also, by the way, after showing with his attempts to court the Light Fury for the first half of the movie, that Toothless has no knowledge of how wild dragon society works. That was what the whole courting focus was all about. So how in the hell does he know enough to become their king? It makes no sense. What is going on, writers? Now, to be fair, I did notice Drago's Bewilderbeast made a cameo in the Hidden World with his missing tusk and everything, so it is possible that he was the king of all wild dragons for a while until Toothless showed up. The Bewilderbeast recognized the Night Fury and yielded the throne to him because he was defeated once before back on Burke. But again, this all happens off screen. And I only noticed the cameo after I got home and watched it on DVD a couple months later. Not to mention that I'm putting this together as a headcanon. The movie gives no indication that this is what happened at all. It's just as easy that it was something else that caused Toothless to be the king of all wild dragons. And besides, if this is what was intended, by the way, it still doesn't address the other stumbling blocks like Toothless having no knowledge of Dragon Society, or how it wasn't just Toothless who defeated the Bewilderbeast, by the way. He just delivered the first volley and the final blow. Remember, there was a whole part in that fight where the rest of the Burkian pack turned on the Bewilderbeast and started blowing him to hell as well. This checks just about every last checkbox of lazy, contradictory storytelling that I can think of, whether we infer the Drago's Bewilderbeast thing or not, and we still haven't even gotten to the bad stuff yet.
Oh, isn't this fun?
Yes? No.
So I've already mentioned how the main characters are stupid, but I've only briefly mentioned the side characters so far. Let's dive into why they were a huge step down and more annoying than they were worth in this movie. Probably the worst of the bunch was Snotlout, who rather than being a begrudging friend and playful rival to Hiccup, like he rightfully should be, instead is now outright antagonistic to him, arrogant, looking to steal Hiccup's place as chief, and get with his freaking mother.
So, Hiccup's mom, any notes on my bone-crushing assault, or was it pretty much perfect?
Oh, it was indescribable. And please, call me Valka. It has been a year.
First name basis. See, that's exactly what I was saying. Just listen up, guys. Yeah, your mom's super impressed with me. I'm like the son she always wanted.
Hey, hold on, gang. I said make camp. Did you see them? Not build a new village.
Who died and made you chief? What?
Ow!
Tough Nut is a moron who is obsessed with his own fake beard and with being Hiccup's wingman, all of which is forced and grating.
Yes! My own place! I plan to build a hut. Only for the bearded. Rough nuts, you gotta stay out. Chin whiskers don't count. Ah, good idea. A little privacy.
Shh.
It's boy talk.
What?
Come on, let's go work this out. So, you want to get married?
No.
Hear the facial hair! Ah!
Every time he was the focus of a scene, I would just be wishing that I could skip the movie forward past him. Especially when he fails to notice that his own goddamn sister has been left behind!
I led us right into his trap.
Yeah, nice work, Chief. Right, Ruff?
Wait. Where is Rough Nut?
We left her behind?
How could you not notice she was missing? You ride a two-headed dragon.
Oh, yeah. I feel like how Roughnut is every day. Dumb.
Who are you? Fishlegs is honestly the least changed to the writers, except for that awful mustache he's grown, and yes, I can be petty, except that his mommy factor has been turned up to 11.
Sorry, still getting the hang of my wings.
Fish legs again with the baby? This is a raid.
I couldn't find a sitter.
He does absolutely nothing in this film except worry about the little baby Gronkle he's carrying around the entire time. And that's about the extent of his character. Nothing about his intelligence, nothing about his knowledge, just, Mommy.
Oh, you brought a baby to a battle.
I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Let's see, who's left? Oh yes, Rough Nut has a fun little moment of annoying the enemy into submission.
I'm stranded on some glacier somewhere, but he never shuts up about dragons. Don't you hate when people never stop talking?
Yes,
I do. Blah, blah, blah. It's so boring.
And literally nothing else throughout the entire plot, except for being a total dumbass who doesn't look back!
Were you followed?
I never look back, Hiccup.
Toothless.
And now our little game must come to an end.
And Valka's only contribution to the plot, aside from being either a scout or an extra fighter in battle, are to go push Astrid to give Hiccup the pep talks he needs before randomly stroking Snotlout's ego at the very end.
You know, Eric may be blessed with brawn, but just between us, you have the brains.
Number one.
So about a third of the way through the movie, we see that when Hiccup is faced with the threat of the villain getting the upper hand on him, he decides that the best thing to do is not to fight, but instead to run, and take all of Burke with him, and run away to the hidden world, unsure if the place even exists at all.
I feel like I'm always asking you this question, but... What? Wake up now! Wake up! Is there an actual plan, or...
Just keep flying until we reach the end of the world.
Ah, seems sensible.
Once again, the entire village is fine with this clearly wrong-headed, desperate, grasping at straws plan. If you can even call it a plan. 2 movies worth about how this island was their ancestral home, how they defended it no matter what from anything and everything, be it human or dragon, for 7 generations and 300 years.
And it's been here for 7 generations, but every single building is new.
And suddenly, whoop, nope, Hiccup says we have to leave, so we're leaving. Bye! Ooh, what's this new island we're stopping on? We like it. It's official. This is our new home. Why? What the hell? Okay, I know I make it sound like I'm dumbing things down, but that's about as deep as the movie goes into explaining the logic of the town, too. It's absolutely incredible. I cannot understand it for the life of me. How do they make such a snap decision about where they're going to live and about how they give up on their former home? All because one villain, one guy, managed to get onto the island and set a trap. Another big problem to cover is the Light Fury. Besides her stupid white design, which I really think should have been just another Night Fury, if for no other reason than to avoid the whole subspecies confusion that she introduced, the Light Fury is only about 8 minutes of total screen time. And because of this, she is given absolutely no character whatsoever aside from the girl or the love interest. Hell, I have to keep calling her the Light Fury because she wasn't even given enough of a character to get a fucking name! She is merely a plot device meant to yank Toothless away from Hiccup. And yet, even that isn't done well because she does nothing to earn Toothless's attention or affection aside from being literally the only girl of a similar species that he has ever seen. She's not interested in him at all, and thus her relationship with Toothless is one-sided at best and toxic at worst. Hey girls, Are you pretty enough that a boy is falling all over himself in order to please you? Let him! Steal him away from all his best friends who have literally sacrificed their lives for him, and let him center his whole life around you! It's totally fine. That's what the Light Fury does. What a fine moral lesson to add to what will soon be a pile of bad morals that this movie is teaching. One more thing to go into before I get into the biggest of my complaints is Grimmel. As a character, he's okay at best. Oh, he is menacing, absolutely. Intimidating? Definitely. Is he compelling? Fuck no! I can see what they were going for, that he'd be a logical outcome of Hiccup if Hiccup had indeed killed Toothless after first shooting him down, and then went on to live this empty life of endlessly seeking out dragons to kill to prove himself to everyone, and that being the only thing he ever knows. But the movie doesn't do a good enough job of really showing that. So he's more a force of nature than he is a foil for Hiccup. Oh, and by the way, his plans freaking suck. Night Furies can't live in the cold. Meanwhile, Burke is described as, what was it?
It's 12 days north of hopeless and a few degrees south of freezing to death.
And what's more than that is he wouldn't have been able to find new Burke if freaking Roughnut hadn't gone and gifted it to him on a silver platter. By the way, how the hell did his armada keep up with a dragon? And furthermore, what the hell's going on with the size of this armada? I could go into Grimmel's plan so much and tear it apart in so many ways, but I'm sorry, we don't have time. We're moving on. Just know that it's so stupid. So now we come to the end of the movie. And with it, the two biggest strikes that, for me, doomed the movie forever. Even if the rest of the film had been absolutely epic and equal to, if not better than the previous two movies combined, these two scenes in the ending were so badly written and forced as to undermine the entirety of the series in about 10 minutes of total screen time. These two scenes would be Hiccup's last gambit and the farewell to the dragons. Chapter 5. Yes, that title is really the only way I can describe the logic of the events that kick off the finale of the movie. To summarize, Grimald has once again bested Hiccup, capturing both the Light Fury and Toothless this time, and by essentially holding a gun to the Light Fury, was making Toothless control the other dragons into not fighting back under the threat of the Light Fury's life, and was now sailing away from New Burke with his capture of all of Burke's dragons with Toothless and the Light Fury. Okay, fine, so a hostage situation. Pretty straightforward. Of course, Hiccup feels like an idiot again and labels himself a failure, needing a pep talk from Astrid, as usual, to spur him into action. What does she say in this pep talk?
You are the bravest, most stubborn, most determined knucklehead I know. Toothless didn't give you that, Hiccup. He just made it
easier.
And now it's gonna be a lot harder. So, what are you gonna do about it?
Okay, cool. So clearly we're setting up to see Hiccup and his gang finally be badasses without their dragons to help them. Great! This is precisely one of the things I've been wanting to see for the whole movie.
Suit up, gang. We're going to get them back.
What? And right out the window with that idea. Never mind how wonderfully set up you made it to see Hiccup and the gang, if not possibly all of Burke, going to fight Grimald themselves without their dragons. Nope, we're nothing without them after all. Sure, later on in the finale, we do actually get to see them fight without their dragons, and they do a good enough job of taking down the Armada. The problem is that besides it being undermined a scene beforehand, they're also too busy trying to continue and hammer in jokes about Roughnut's beard, about fish meat, Snotlout getting his armor caught on a corner again, and they're making every possible quip they can. It just removes every bit of badassness that they could have possibly ever had in that scene.
Yeah, it's almost like we're a team.
I honestly cannot remember a single epic action moment from that fight. The only thing I can remember from it are jokes. Bad ones. Really, really bad ones. And that's a damn shame, because this is the climactic finale of the whole movie if not the whole series. And I can't remember any badassness from it. In a movie about training dragons and fighting with dragons. That's a fail in my book. And see, the thing is, that's not the worst of it either. In the clifftop scene, after a brief cut back to Grimmel gloating at Toothless as he makes him command Cloudjumper into a cage, we cut back to Hiccup and the gang in their wingsuits on the edge of the cliff. Rough Nuts said it all too well for me.
So, jump off the cliff in these. That's the best you've got?
And not even a second later, they're off! Doing exactly that! No word to us about what the hell the plan was, if there even is one. All I could think as I watched them dive off that cliff was, well, the title of the section. And the worst part is, it was so easy to avoid this, too. Let me just add a few lines of dialogue right here after Astrid says,
So, what are you gonna do about it?
But, Astrid, Grimmel took the dragons. Not just Toothless, all of them. What could we... Wait a second. Oh, wow! He did! He took all of them! He took all the dragons! Don't you see? They have no idea what kind of a powder keg they're sitting on. All we have to do is light a fire under it. But what about the Light Fury? How can we light a fire without Grimmel shooting her? Toothless. We just need to give him a distraction that he can use to save her and himself. What if he can't break free, though? He can, and he will. For her. Trust me. Trust him. Well, how about that? An actual fucking plan! One that not just makes sense to them as the ones executing it, but to us watching it. It's also a plan that sounds badass to me, makes Hiccup actually seem smart for once, and, on top of that, it's a plan that doesn't just involve getting the dragons back so that they can rely upon them again, but rather revolves around how they, the humans, can help the dragons by giving them the moment they need to help themselves. Isn't that novel? This also highlights Hiccup's trust in Toothless, not just trusting Toothless to save him this time, but to save his mate instead. It's the perfect moments of acceptance for Hiccup, about how Toothless's needs have shifted away from him and to his own kind and the Light Fury as the King of Dragons. And if you want to end the movie that way, you need to set that up. But once again, that's not the movie we got.
Chapter 6.
So, after the riders fling themselves off the cliff and get lucky when Toothless does indeed break himself free and save the Light Fury, Grimald is defeated when Hiccup, in the aforementioned good scene of the movie, tells the Light Fury to save Toothless, letting go and sacrificing himself and Grimald to a watery death, only for Hiccup to be saved at the last moment when the Light Fury decides to swoop in and save him too. Hooray! Hiccup is alive! Toothless is alive! Grimald and the rest of the bad guys are dead or defeated, and all the dragons are free again to settle on New Berk and live happily ever after. Wait, what's going on? Why is everyone taking the saddles off of their dragons? Grimmel is defeated. The other hunter ships are all on fire and sinking. The dragons are safe again. Why the hell is everyone saying goodbye? What the hell's going on? There's no reason for this. There's no danger anymore. The Light Fury had followed Toothless back once. She can stay there on New Berk with him and Hiccup. Let some other dragon be king. They got along just fine before, didn't they? Even if Toothless does decide to go back and be with the Light Fury, why the hell are all the other dragons being made to leave too? What? They clearly don't want to leave. But apparently nobody gives a shit about their opinion. What the hell is going on here? Great. So, once again, the dragons aren't people in this movie. They're just plot points, MacGuffins, or animals. What the fuck?
There were dragons when I was a boy.
So wait a second. It wasn't just Toothless and all the other dragons on Berk that went back to the hidden world. It was all the other dragons in the entire goddamn world? Really? So Toothless's roar can travel that far, huh? And apparently reach the ears and command all the dragons in the world to leave. You're shitting me, right?
Yes, the world believes the dragons are gone, if they ever existed at all.
Oh, and to further add to the implausibility of all this, you're saying that everyone just forgot all the times they ever encountered a dragon before, and thus think that the dragons never existed. This isn't some 2 or 3 generations down the line kind of thing we're hearing. It's clearly not even more than a decade or so later that you're telling us this, Hiccup! So what? Everyone on Earth just developed radical short-term memory loss all at once? What?
Our world doesn't deserve you. Yet.
Yet? Yet? What do you mean the world doesn't deserve them? Yet? You, Hiccup, created an entire island human dragon utopia! You have been the biggest positive dragon-human interaction that there has ever been, in fact! And you're giving up right now! You're sending all the dragons away and letting the best chance for them to ever return die an entirely unnecessary death! If you can't foster a world good enough for the dragons, nobody else ever will! Do you not understand that? You are single-handedly putting all the dragons in a giant glowy cage called the Hidden World forever! You are no better than the trappers you have been fighting, Hiccup!
Legend says that when the ground quakes or lava spews from the earth, it's the dragons, letting us know they're still here, waiting for us to figure out how to get along.
Oh, so it's the world's fault that it's not having dragons in it. It's the world is not good enough. It's because of us shitty humans and our wars and our insecurities and attacking each other and everything. That's the reason we can't have nice things like dragons, huh? Nope. Doesn't matter that you're an awesome, amazing person who deserves to have a dragon best friend who will make your life infinitely better. The rest of the world sucks, and because of that, you can't have nice things. Life is shit. Get used to it. Fuck you, movie. Fuck you so hard. See, this ending, this goddamn ending right here, this is the reason why the movie is so offensive to me that I had to spend about 4,000 words and counting writing about why the hell I hated it, tearing it apart, and talking about why the franchise deserves so much better. These morals, these lessons that it's inadvertently teaching in this last movie, I reject every single one of them. Lessons like, no matter what you do, it will never be good enough because there are still bad people out there ruining it for the rest of us. Or, you have to say goodbye to the things you love because of women. Or, give up on your dreams because they might not be the same dreams as your friends. This movie undermines every single lesson the previous 2 films have tried to teach. Every single one of them. Good lessons, too. Ones that are super important to learn and inspiring. Lessons like fight for your dreams, even if you have to fight the whole goddamn world. Or, your friends will make you stronger than you ever thought you could be. Or, even if it seems like you're alone, you will find a friend if you take a leap of faith. Call me naive if you want. Call me a dreamer who hasn't grown up. Call me whatever the hell you want. But if the lessons of the hidden world are the lessons of adulthood, then screw that. I'm staying a child forever and happily so.
Listen, you little wiseacre. I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I can see where this is going. You wonder how I think I could have done it differently to make it better. Alright, I suppose it's only fair. First thing I'd change, the theme of the goddamn movie. I realized as I was watching an interview with the director that everything wrong with this finale came from them trying to reach an endpoint for the series. I thought back to the book and the line, "There were dragons when I was a boy." The creators of this film didn't set out to write something based off of what they had already done with the series and build to a logical conclusion. They instead started with a conclusion in mind and tried to write their way into that conclusion, regardless of what it meant the movie would end up saying. I really do want to go a lot deeper and fix so many of the movie's problems, but rewriting the whole thing from scratch isn't something that I'm willing to do, at least not yet. Instead, let me just change one major idea of the movie and branch it from there. What would I change? I'd make it so that Toothless doesn't want to leave Hiccup. It's just that simple. The rest of the movie stays mostly the same until the first time Hiccup actually finds the hidden world, save for maybe also making the Dragon Riders a little bit more competent and less annoying, giving Valka something substantive to do, until we get to the scene where Hiccup and Astrid are flying through the hidden world, at which point there's a transition to a new scene where they fly through the dark tunnel. We see Toothless and the Light Fury are together at the base of the waterfalls of the hidden world, happily nuzzling each other for a moment, and we can tell from the transition and the vignette on the frame that it's a few hours in the past, and Toothless is looking up forlornly at the top of the waterfalls. After a few moments of being happy with the Light Fury, yet still staring up towards the outside world, she gets up to answer perhaps, another dragon's roar from behind the waterfalls. While she's distracted, Toothless starts to take off, but then the Light Fury suddenly intercedes, flying up in front of him and roaring at him to stay put where he is, which Toothless begrudgingly does so after a brief bit of arguing with her. He lands, slumps down to the ground, and whimpers, and the Light Fury looks back up at the outside world herself, then back to Toothless, clearly confused. She can't possibly understand why would he want to go back there to the outside world. This place is so great, this place is perfect, why does he want to go back there? She drops down and nuzzles her mate regardless, trying to cheer him up, and while he does reciprocate somewhat, smiling a little bit, leaning up into the nuzzle, Toothless is still clearly morose about what to him is obvious, and to us is obvious, but to her, she still doesn't get. Thus, we see that Toothless is indeed happy with her, but he's conflicted. He wants to go back to Hiccup, but isn't being allowed to, which is, by the way, why he hasn't returned to Burke for the past 2 days. Then we fade back to the present, and to Hiccup and Astrid landing in the main chamber of the hidden world. So in this version, they see that Toothless and the Light Fury are not the king and queen of all dragons. Instead, it's some other dragon. Perhaps another friendly bewildebeest like from the second movie, or if you want to keep the cameo of Drago's bewildebeest in the hidden world, you can make him king, maybe. Either way, it doesn't matter. Toothless and the Light Fury are just 2 random dragons among the flock now. Hiccup and Astrid spot them and watch Toothless and her do their mating dance and then settle down in the secluded spot of the chamber where they're all happy together. It's then, like in the movie proper, Hiccup is dejected for a moment before they're noticed and called out by a random dragon. The king lets out a roar, at which point we see Toothless snap his head up in awareness, spot the 2 of them, and shoot up to his paws in panic. He leaps into the air and flies fast to intercept them, fighting off all the other dragons in the hidden world, while the Light Fury watches on in shock. She still doesn't understand what her new mate is doing, fighting off all the other dragons that she knows, instead of just ordering the other dragons to back off like in the regular movie, in order to carry Hiccup to safety, openly defying the King of Dragons and the Light Fury in the process. So from there, again, the movie continues pretty much as it did in reality. We get the awkward moment where Hiccup tells Toothless it's okay, that he belongs there, only this time, Toothless doesn't look sad and accepting, he looks pensive, as if he's warring with himself, trying to think about what to do, while Hiccup keeps talking oblivious to what Toothless is thinking, until the Light Fury pops up in the grass. Once again, both he and Hiccup are ecstatic for a moment, before Roughnut interrupts by landing, and Grimald attacks. The ending battle and the hostage situation play out as they did, with my additional dialogue, of course, from Chapter 6, and then we get to Grimald shooting at Hiccup from atop the Light Fury, when he dives at him from Toothless's back. So in my version now, instead of Toothless getting hit with a dart and passing out, Toothless sees it and tries to dodge. Except this time, the dart tears apart his prosthetic tail fin once again, leaving him only able to cry out and fall from the air once more. Hiccup, now having knocked Grimald off of the Light Fury's back, spots Toothless crying out for help and staring at him. Toothless glances between Hiccup's eyes and the Light Fury's eyes and then back to Hiccup again, suggesting an idea to Hiccup. Hiccup gets this, and releases the Light Fury and lets go, with the save him line, and like in the movie proper, we play out the following moments in slow motion, as Toothless watches her diving towards him, grabbing him, and tackling him onto the cliff edge just in time to save him. Meanwhile, Hiccup is falling to his death. Except this time, because now Toothless is awake, we see him immediately get up from where he's been tackled and scramble to the cliff's edge, staring over it at Hiccup in panic, falling to his death with Grimald tearing apart his wings. He knows he can't go down and save Hiccup because his tail fin has been shredded, so all he can do is watch. And Hiccup looks back. Their eyes meet for a moment, and Hiccup calmly says, "Goodbye, bud." Toothless's eyes go wide, and he shrieks. This is the moment of absolute horror for him. This is his worst fear realized. Hiccup is going to die, and he can't do anything to save him. He turns to the Light Fury in panic, about to roar at her to save Hiccup too. But by the time the camera turns, we and Toothless both see that she's already dashing for the edge to dive off and save Hiccup herself. She catches him just in time and brings him back up to Toothless, who, after a brief moment of nuzzling Hiccup and pulling him against his chest for a hug again, turns back to the Light Fury and presses his forehead to hers in thanks. Hiccup watches on with a smile. So we cut to a few minutes later to see Hiccup finishing attaching the new spare auto tail fin that he'd made for Toothless, one which he'd built for Toothless while he was away in order to occupy his time. So now we pull back, and we have Hiccup facing Toothless again. This time, however, when Hiccup tells him that it's time to go on to the hidden world without him, Toothless pauses for a moment, staring back at Hiccup in thought. After a little while, he shakes his head no, and then adamantly sits down in front of him. It startles both Hiccup and the Light Fury, who look at each other for a moment in surprised confusion, before Hiccup turns back and tries to convince Toothless. "Bud, you belong there, with her," he argues, gesturing back to the Light Fury again. "It isn't safe up here. There's hunters and trappers, and you'll never have to stop fighting if you stay here. Grimald proves that, like Drago did before." And then he gestures to the ships currently burning the ocean. Once again, though, Toothless is steadfast, making a show of planting himself down on his hind. He clearly doesn't care, whatever the problems it'll cause for him later on. He's staying. It's at this point that Hiccup turns his attention back to the Light Fury behind him to make a sarcastic quip while gesturing at Toothless. Something like, "Can you believe this guy?" Except he's cut off when Toothless once again presses his nose to Hiccup's extended hand. Hiccup turns back to look at Toothless again, and suddenly notices that all of the dragons behind Toothless, the wild ones, the Burke dragons, they're not just bowing to Toothless, they're bowing to him now, the same way they did for Toothless at the end of the last movie. It finally dawns on Hiccup that none of the dragons want to leave, and we see him slump his shoulders in defeat and mutter, "Stubborn reptile. All right, fine, you win. But what about her?" He turns his gaze back and gestures to the Light Fury again, who's been watching everything intently from behind Hiccup. Toothless pulls his head away from Hiccup's palm and looks at her. He walks up and she stares at him, then turns her head back to gesture towards the direction of the hidden world and lets out a questioning mew, to which Toothless responds with a shake of his head and a light snarl, patting the ground with his forepaws to tell her that he's staying right here. He then gestures his head towards Hiccup while looking at her. The Light Fury looks at Hiccup again, confused for a moment, and a little bit unsure. Her wings begin to spread like she might take off, before Toothless gently bumps into her hind end and shoves her towards Hiccup. She yelps in surprise, and she ends up standing right in front of Hiccup, looking really kind of uncomfortable, but also kind of mostly just unsure of what to do. So she looks back at Toothless, who makes a show of closing his eyes and pushing his nose forward to meet an invisible hand. She turns back to look at Hiccup again, who shrugs gently at her and kind of giggles. And Hiccup closes his eyes, turns his head away, and extends his palm. And just like Toothless in the first movie, there's a moment of hesitation, then an aborted attempt, before the Light Fury finally closes her eyes and presses her nose to Hiccup's palm. At which point the rest of the Burkians let out a cheer, which startles the Light Fury into snapping her eyes open with a squawk and tumbling onto her back. Toothless catches her, and all of Burke lets out a huge big laugh, including Hiccup, who then quips, "Don't worry, you'll get used to them. Eventually." She looks up at Toothless, who nods at her before looking back to Hiccup, and smiles. Cue the music as we once again cut to Toothless and Hiccup flying through the air once more. The Light Fury on one side, brushing her wingtip against Toothless's, and Stormfly and Astrid flying on their other side. And everyone looks as content as can be. Hiccup closes his eyes, tilts his head back, and takes a deep, happy breath in as they pass through a cloud. And as they emerge on the other side of that cloud, we've transitioned through time to see an older, bearded Hiccup still flying atop Toothless emerging. Older Stormfly and Astrid at their one side, Light Fury still on the other side. The Light Fury looks back behind her, and the camera turns to see that Toothless's kits are flying behind the Light Fury. We turn back and pull out of the close-up we were in to see Hiccup looking down at his own child sitting in the saddle in his lap. Meanwhile, his other kid pops up over his shoulder behind him. Toothless's kits and Hiccup's kids start playing with each other in midair while the monologue begins to play over them. Dragons. The world sees them as devils, demons. Some are even called the unholy offspring of lightning and death itself. But we know better. I learned that when I shot my future best friend out of the sky on a cold, dark night long ago. Yes, the world may never accept us. And that's okay. Because sometimes the things you love are worth fighting the whole world for. And if you keep on fighting and never give up, then maybe, just maybe. And here we pull the camera back slowly as we see Hiccup, after having handed his kids off to Astrid, turns around to look behind him. And underneath them, emerging from a cloud, are dozens and dozens and dozens of dragons from all different corners of the world, all with riders from all over the world, filling the sky, including even the King of Dragons from the Hidden World too, as the monologue concludes. A part of the world will learn to change too. And Hiccup turns back around to pat Toothless as they smile at each other one more time, while the music swells and they dash off into the sky ahead of the camera, while Toothless unleashes a mighty roar, and we have one final giant drum beat that cuts us to the title screen, and the credits begin. Clearly, Hiccup and Toothless have not only started families together, but they have indeed changed the world. They have brought peace between dragons and humans from both sides. And that is where we end the series. Now, I don't know about you, but you cannot tell me that is not both heartwarming and inspiring. None of this downer, cynical ending the real movie gave us, where someday the world will be good enough, and instead the message is, if you dig in and stick to what you believe in, you can make the world good enough. I don't know about you, but I want my kids to learn to be hopeful and empowered, rather than learning to be jaded cynics who are dour about having to give up on the world. I want to see a movie where your friends refuse to leave you, even if you think they should, and even if you try to push them away. They will always come back, and they will stick with you. I want to see a movie where in the end, you aren't punished for what you believe in, you are rewarded for it. This is the ending that I wanted from the series. And I'm so mad that we didn't get it. Because this series is one of my favorite of all time, and it's changed lives. It has shown kids and adults alike what standing up for yourself looks like. And The Hidden World took that all away, just so the ending could match the line, "There were dragons when I was a boy." Screw that. There are still dragons, and to me, there always will be.